Dear church, let's talk about World Bible School. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host once again, Chris McCurley. My guest today is Brian Davis from World Bible School. Brian, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me.
All the way from Austin, Texas, right?
That's right.
I appreciate this. I wanted our viewers and listeners to know more about the great work that's happening at World Bible School. Before we jump into that, though, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your family. People may not know, but your son, Noah, was an intern at Oldham Lane for a couple of years. He went through our preacher training camp. We love Noah. He went to Freed-Hardeman for a short time with my daughter while she was there. And, so that's kind of our connection. But, tell others about your family, kind of what's going on there at World Bible School, then also kind of define what your role there is as well, if you would.
Our family has been missionaries for several decades in Africa. In fact, Noah and his younger brother Bryson were born in South Africa, and then they grew up in the Central African country of Zambia. And then we, in 2013, moved back to the States in order to put them in school and get them ready for college. Both of them are at Freed-Hardeman now. Noah graduates in May and has already been hired to be a youth and family minister at the Central Church of Christ in Paducah, Kentucky. We're excited about that.
Yes.
But he had some wonderful times learning about preaching and learning about ministry at Oldham Lane, and we appreciate that so much. As we have come back to the States, we got back in touch with John Reese, who is, of course, the president at World Bible School for the last 16 years. We had always used World Bible School overseas as missionaries, as it just multiplies the work of missionaries as they reach out, as they are provided with literature ministry that can blanket an entire area and let the seekers sort of float to the top for church planting missionaries who are trying to establish the church in new areas of the world.
Yeah.
So that was very natural for us.
Absolutely.
It actually goes back further in my family. The second president of World Bible School was Ruel Lemons. He taught a gospel meeting in Arkansas where my grandparents obeyed the gospel.
Wow.
And that's how we came to know Jesus Christ. And so that history then, as John invited me to work with World Bible School, has been a privilege to give back to what that has meant to my family over the years.
Absolutely.
In fact, I remember my dad signing me up to help him teach some students in Nigeria when I was in fifth grade. And that's part of my formation, learning how to share my faith as a young person.
So World Bible School has been around a while then.
Yes, in 1970. In fact, I have a picture here of the founder, Jimmy Lovell, a Tennessee fella. In this would have been back in the 50s. Began a little magazine called Action Magazine, where he called the Brotherhood to action in evangelism. And as they discussed different ideas in that forum, the idea of unleashing the power of the everyday Christian, the priesthood of all believers, to let them be involved in sharing their faith through correspondence course studies, began being discussed, and they kept working on it. Finally, in the 1960s, the latter part of the 1960s, Jimmy just put an ad in a Nigerian newspaper and said, if you're interested in Bible correspondence course, let me know.
Huh.
Well, he had so much response from that one ad that the mail filled his entire 2-car garage in California where he was working.
Wow, that is amazing.
He didn't even have a correspondence course to offer at the time. So, in a panic, he sent out the word to the Brotherhood preachers, anybody want to write a correspondence course? Several preachers from around the Brotherhood quickly put together a course, which was the first course with World Bible School. And they began working through the hundreds of thousands of Bible study requests that they had got. And that's sort of how World Bible School began.
Unreal. I had no idea that that's how they began. So through the years, obviously, there has been a concerted effort to streamline things, to be able to communicate better. And of course, with the advent of internet and all that, it's really changed some things. But talk a little bit about that, the mission and purpose of World Bible School.
World Bible School wants to share, I'd say, two parts, and it's embodied in the Great Commission, teaching the plan of salvation through Jesus Christ, teaching the person of Jesus Christ, to whom that plan of salvation provides a relationship with our Creator for eternity. But then also teaching all things whatsoever I have commanded. So those two sides of the same coin, we want to equip the brotherhood, equip the priesthood of all believers, equip the everyday Christian to be able to feel empowered to share their faith, whether it be here in America domestically or with cultures around the world. And so somewhat of a unique quality to our work is we're not just a distribution of literature ministry. We actually work to connect the seeker with the person who wants to be a study helper.
Yeah, okay.
That takes a global network of volunteers who are passionate about helping people learn about Jesus, being able to connect seekers and study helpers and grow that in a balanced way. But it's really a privilege to see those connections take place.
And is that kind of your role, as to make those connections or to oversee those connections?
Well, at the first of the year, John Reese did retire, and I was asked to serve as president of World Bible School.
Okay.
We have an incredible, talented team of both young and old who work with us to empower those thousands of study helpers who want to use our tools.
Yeah.
We offer the tools, we provide the tools. My role is to develop that vision that gets all of our talent working and pulling in the same direction, whether that's someone who does work full time with us, or whether that's the person in the pew who wants to share their faith, or whether that's the volunteer in Central Africa who wants to recruit students and partner them with a willing study helper who will provide that literature, whether it's paper or digital, for them to study and become acquainted with the Bible and get to know Jesus Christ.
So talk a little bit about how the process works. Okay, so how do you find participants, people who want to learn the gospel, and then the people who would like to volunteer and share it with them? Talk about just kind of the process a little bit.
Well, I'll talk about it in general, and then I want to kind of walk us through some of our tools, because we have a number. We call it a toolbox. We have lots of different tools that people can use because people have different approaches, different talents, different gifts. But the general approach to how we connect the seeker with the study helper is that, one, we make the church aware of these tools that are available. Once they decide to use our tools, they're in charge of how they do it. We don't tell people what they have to do. We try to give people hints and tips of best practices. But then we have a network of volunteers around the globe, whether it's missionaries, whether it's local evangelists, whether it's church leaders in an area, who are really excited about connecting seekers in a large scale, blanketing an entire area, an entire nation sometimes, with the opportunity to study. And then those seekers, when they learn of the opportunity, they ask, they seek the study, and we simply facilitate the connecting of those requests to those willing to study with them.
Yeah.
And for instance, in 2019, before the world experienced the COVID shutdown, we had 1.4 million requests for Bible study in 1 year's time. That didn't include the ones who are currently studying. That was new requests for study. So the interest out there in the world is just massive. And digitally, our number one area of requests for Bible study turns out to be the United States of America.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Which is very encouraging to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit statistics. I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but well, first of all, let me ask this. How far is the reach? So what all countries have you been reaching? You said the United States, you've mentioned, Africa. How far is the reach for World Bible School?
With our traditional paper correspondence programs, it all depended upon the functionality of postal systems in countries, and not every country has a postal system that's functioning well, and so that was a limiting factor. But as over the last 10, 15 years, we've been able to mirror everything we do in paper with digital.
Sure.
Literally all those barriers are down now. We can go into any nation on earth, even nations where governments are not very friendly towards Christianity or positive about allowing that to be a message in their national space, so to speak. Through digital means, the offer can go out literally to every nation on earth now.
Yeah. Okay. And you've had pretty well requests from everywhere or close to it?
Well, there are language barriers that are a little more difficult to overcome.
Sure.
We currently have our lessons in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese.
Okay.
And that covers a great deal of the world.
Yeah.
There's a number of people groups that have translated our materials in their vernacular language that perhaps is one language among many within a nation. And they have developed those and used those. In fact, I have here one on my desk where I was just in the country of Zimbabwe, and they had translated our materials into the Shona language, which is the predominant people group and language group in that country.
Yeah.
And so we do have that kind of usage of our materials. But there are still large areas, especially in Asia, where we don't have our materials in their language, and that would be a limiting factor in those areas. But we're always developing partnerships to see how we can better serve those areas.
Yeah, it takes a lot of volunteers to do this work. I know that Oldham Lane has been heavily involved in World Bible School for a while now, and we have a lot of willing volunteers, and it takes that. Again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how many, statistically speaking, how many Bible studies or correspondences are going on right now?
Well, currently we're building back from, because when the world shut down for COVID, a lot of postal systems actually shut down.
Okay.
And for instance, there's 4 or 5 major hubs reaching Africa. All of those shut down for several months. Okay. And so we're building back from that now. But last year we got our statistics in. We had 870,000 requests in 2021.
Wow.
Where, a couple of years earlier we had more, but we see that coming back now.
Sure.
Especially as people are thinking about their spiritual well-being and eternal matters because of COVID.
Absolutely. Any idea how many correspondences or how many, you've reached over the years?
Well, that's a hard one to come up with, because once we provide the tools for a congregation or a group of people,
sure,
they don't have to answer to us.
Right.
We just equip them with the tools. But we did a study one year with our larger congregations and the kinds of numbers that they of their own free will provided to us just to let us know how it was going. And we did a mathematical extrapolation of what that could look like. And conservatively speaking, we estimate since 1970 about 24 million people have studied through World Bible School in that period of time.
That is amazing.
So that obviously requires an incredible army of volunteer study helpers. And currently, we think we have about between 6,000, 8,000 teachers who are using World Bible School tools and actively studying with people. And anecdotally, that's I can share a couple of stories of how that works out.
Sure.
I'll share one at the risk of frightening people. And the congregation I grew up in, Chattanooga, Tennessee, the Brainerd Church of Christ, one of the elders, John Morgan, his mother was a World Bible School teacher, an avid World Bible School teacher, and she's indicative of the very quiet but serious about sharing their faith person in the pew who takes that Great Commission seriously. When she passed away, her family went into her home and looked at all of her World Bible School files. She had files for 20,000 students
Wow.
that over the course of a couple of decades she had been teaching.
Unreal.
We have a wall here at the headquarters in Austin where we call it our wall of honor, and congregations can honor their often unsung heroes of World Bible School teachers.
Sure.
And her picture is there. Her name is Jo Morgan. And in her little description of what she did as a teacher, it mentions she had 20,000 students.
That's
now,
crazy.
most of us can't tackle 20,000 students, but
Right.
that shows you the power of that priesthood of believers when they are activated, when they're empowered to share their faith.
No
And
doubt.
that's what really energizes me. But one other story that's a little more indicative, I was recently at a retreat, and I came across a fella who's a leader in the church in Houston.
Mhm.
He's a young man. He's a trade lawyer.
Okay.
And so he's often traveling back between Europe and the United States, and he spends a lot of time in airports. And he just sidled up beside of me and said, when I'm in airports, I'm on your digital teaching platform, and I'm sharing my faith when otherwise I'd just be sitting there drinking coffee.
Really?
And so he has a number of students that he keeps working through, and in his airport time, that's when he teaches.
That's
And
really
wow,
neat.
what a productive use of time.
Yeah, no kidding. So you've got a lot of stories like that. I'm sure that you don't even hear. I mean, there's probably all kinds of folks like that are doing things that you don't even ever get wind of. I know that you still take some journeys to Africa and other places. How often do you get to go and kind of see the fruits of the labor of World Bible School? Do you talk to students who have gone through there? Have you seen, students who have completed the course maybe years prior and now are teaching or preaching or things like that?
Absolutely. I try to take 2 or 3 trips a year to stay in touch with those volunteers that make it all happen on the ground.
Right.
In February, I was traveling with one of my former elders, Cam Hurst,
Yes.
who you know, the
Yes.
Abilene, and we went into Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe has had a very difficult time with their postal services through the COVID years.
Okay.
That country has 11 or 12 million in population, but it has been one of our number one nations for student recruitment because the literacy level in that country is so high.
Okay.
It's one of the highest in all of Africa.
Interesting.
We estimate over the last 10 years, we've taught about 2 million students in that country.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally leavening the entire nation. But as they were struggling with their postal services, they came to us and challenged us. All right, if that's not working so well, we need to put together a network of preachers, of church leaders, of people who have become Christians through World Bible School to continue offering that opportunity within our nation. And I visited with ladies at the Avondale Church of Christ in Harare who were willing to facilitate getting lessons to and from different cities and villages.
Mm-hmm.
I studied with the Matari School of Preaching students who were wanting to use these tools in evangelism as they went out to plant churches. I've talked to the guys at at different congregations who were wanting to be a part of a network using local buses to get lessons to and from. And so we're now trying to print materials in country to facilitate that. So even if the postal services are being challenged, we can still offer the opportunity to study.
Yeah.
And I just received an email last week where they had their first follow-up meeting from an area where several schools had been offered the opportunity to study. They had 225 of the students come to the seminar that was being taught by all of these volunteers. And they broke them up into small groups and said, you've been studying with a teacher in the United States, and you're now in your studies. Can we help you understand that final step of obeying the gospel? And out of those 225 that Saturday, 65 asked to be baptized into Christ.
Wow.
And they all walked down to the river, and they just, one after another, 65 obeyed the gospel.
What a great story. Yeah, I know that you mentioned a while ago that the United States was really the number one country that y'all correspond with. And we have talked about it at Oldham Lane, how many times people come to us as ministers or elders and say, hey, I'm studying with a friend of mine. Do you have any materials or any ideas, where to start? And I always point them to World Bible School. I mean, that material is just as good for somebody who's right here in the United States as it is for somebody in Africa. And we've talked about, even cleaning up our website a bit to put, a tab, a link there to where, if you want to study the Bible, here it is, and link
Sure.
it to that, because it is sometimes hard to know where to start. And, it can be an overwhelming task, even for a volunteer who knows the Bible and wants to study with someone, where to go. And we think that the material World Bible School, offers is as good as any, as far as helping walk someone through Scripture, through the plan of salvation, how to respond, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, let me just share, I serve as an elder at the West Side Church of Christ in Round Rock, Texas.
Uh-huh.
Let me just give that as an example of how they're using these tools.
Sure.
They have a group of study helpers that send out our paper courses, and our paper courses are usually in these small booklets, very inexpensive, so that we can teach large numbers of people. But they also, you mentioned biblical, about half of the course is in red. That's actual Scripture.
Yeah.
But many of our students don't have a Bible in the developing world.
Right.
And so they can actually follow along in the Scriptures themselves. And the commentary just points back to the Scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have lessons that they can send in. And then all of these same lessons are mirrored in our online studies. This is our course, Knowing Jesus. And that kind of study can be offered not only in the developing world, around the world, but it's also one of our number one tools in America to reach into our prison systems where digital tools are not allowed for teaching.
Yeah.
But the paper materials are. And so many congregations minister to their local jails or prisons, and they're very well received. The students continue studying through. In fact, I was just at a Whataburger in Abilene, and I was sitting with some friends just of a morning having coffee, and a fellow was sitting beside me, and I had a World Bible School pin on my jacket. He looked like he had had a rough year, but he leaned over and he said, "Is that a World Bible School pin on your jacket?" And I said, "Yes, it sure is." And he said, "Well, I just came out of prison, but I want you to know one of your World Bible School teachers sent me your lessons while I was in prison.
Wow.
I obeyed the gospel, and I'm sitting here with my friends who are members of the Lord's church, and we're having coffee, and I wanted to say thank you."
Wow.
And he told me the name of his teacher, and she was 100 years old, but she was still sharing her faith.
Seriously. Man, it's just unreal, the people that have been reached by this and continue to be reached. And I'm sure there's all kinds of stories like that. I feel like I've said wow 100 times in this podcast, but I mean, it really is. It's just amazing, and it's encouraging and inspiring to know what the material is doing, and not just the material, but the volunteers, because I know, at least from Oldham Lane's perspective, I can speak to that, is that our volunteers have not only just swapped, answers and questions and materials, but they build a rapport. A lot of times there is this connection with so much of evangelism is relationship oriented. And I know that our folks have developed relationships that even after they've obeyed the gospel, they continue that correspondence. That's a really neat thing.
We've had World Bible School teachers. I remember one of the great World Bible School teachers, Paula Leverett. She's there in Abilene as well, but she used to be up in Amarillo. She went on a World Bible School campaign, and she put out word she was going to be in a certain place in Southern Africa. Mm-hmm. She had students come across borders from neighboring countries and travel days to meet her. And they were able to connect that way. So the relationship is really huge. as president of World Bible School, I also edit Action Magazine,
Yes.
the original magazine that Jimmy put together. This is one that we'll be releasing here next. And you see the two gentlemen there. A World Bible School study helper in Oklahoma had a student in New York City, and he obeyed the gospel. And then the guy in Oklahoma calls a preacher of the church there in New York, and he helped baptize the gentleman and help him find his place in Christ.
Amazing.
Such powerful relationships that people carry on for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We've had visitors from, say, the country of Ethiopia, where we can't send missionaries. They will visit the States and look up their World Bible School teacher, and that relationship is so precious.
I was speaking at a youth conference back in January, and the gentleman who oversees it was telling me, that when they open up registration, that a lot of times they will get people register from Africa and places like that, and they're like, they know they're not coming. They just got online and registered for whatever reason. I don't think it's always a prank. It's just, they have the best of intentions. And he said, we always kind of discount that one and or those that sign up from Africa. And he said this past year, lo and behold, they show up. There was a group that came from Africa, and I think there was some sort of connection there with the States and kind of probably World Bible School or whatever, but they're so hungry, it seems, for the word, and to have volunteers that are ready and willing to share that with them is really, really a neat thing. And I'm encouraged because I had no idea the United States would be number one. I just figured that there would be sort of, maybe apathetic or not care, about what is there to offer, but that's really encouraging to me.
Let me mention a couple of other tools that are making a big difference in the United States. We've always encouraged our teachers, if a student has studied through 5 lessons
yes.
and they don't have a Bible, let's try to help them get a Bible. And about 6 years ago, we started producing what we call our study edition Bible. This is the first one that we produced. And it's either the English Standard Version or the New King James Version. And in the back, we have about 100 pages of study notes that, again, just ask the question that people are asking, and then points to scripture where you can look it up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been such a convenient and positive way for our next generation to ask a question and then go themselves and look up God's answer.
Yes.
That this has been powerfully received. And over the last 5-6 years, we've seen about 500,000 of these Bibles go out.
Wow.
So 500,000 of these into the hands of people, both young and old. In fact, our number one request after we did that was for one of a font size that you could actually read. So this is another product that we've put together, but again, with study notes that point to what the New Testament says about salvation, about Christian living, about who I am, about who God is. And so that's been powerfully received as well.
Yeah, I have both of those, and you've gifted me with both of those, and I love both of them. I've used them on many, many occasions. Brian, as we wrap up, I want to end with you telling our viewers and listeners how they can get involved. How do they contact you? All those pertinent things that they need to know in order to get involved with World Bible School.
Okay, well, in terms of your involvement as a congregation, we have a group of trainers that are willing to come to any congregation and speak either to a small group or to the congregation at large, whatever would be convenient. And we can help your congregation learn about the tools that we offer. We have about 6 or 7 really dynamic evangelistic tools that can meet the specific needs of the congregation. Things as specific as developing a web ad connect program that targets your area around your church building and funnel students, seekers to your members.
Excellent.
Or on the mission field where you have a missionary, we can do the same thing. We can help develop paper teaching programs, digital teaching programs, and we also have a new social media teaching program. So we're willing to train in person at no cost to the congregation. We're also willing to train through Zoom or other conference call situations. We have a lot of young people that work with our digital tools who are very good at that.
Yes.
And so they can do a Zoom training if that's more convenient.
Okay.
If an individual would like to check out what World Bible School is, they can go to www.worldbibleschool.org and look at the courses, look at the lessons. You can even sign up to be a student yourself and study through and learn the curriculum. There's a button there to sign up to be a teacher. We also have a site, www.worldbibleschool.net, which is more of the resources for our teachers.
Okay.
Because the resources for teachers isn't necessarily the first image you want your students to see when students are surfing on the web. That's why we have two websites. But through either one, you can learn about the tools. You can sign up to be a teacher. It takes a couple of days to get your credentials set up to teach. And then you can either start studying online. If your student requests to study by paper, then you can certainly call us. Our number here at the office is 512-345-8190. And you can talk to someone in person and order any materials that would be helpful to you, or any of the Bibles that we provide for study. And so any way we can help the congregation or the individual, we're ready to do so.
That's great. Brian, thank you for all of that. And I want our viewers and listeners to know as well that there is a branch of World Bible School called Methodist. And we're actually going to talk to Marcus McKee next week, and perhaps you too. We're going to talk to you guys again next week, but we're going to talk more about Methodist and the great things that it is doing as well. I just thank you so much for joining us this week, Brian. Thank you for all that great information, and thank you for the great work that you're doing there.
Well, we're so excited, and we appreciate so much the mission of this podcast. It's making a difference in the brotherhood and in the world, and we appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you, Brian. And I want to tell our viewers and listeners, if you have a question for me or Brian, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If the question is specific for Brian, we'll make sure that he gets it. We'll forward it on to him, and I'm sure he'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Brian, again, thank you. We'll see you soon. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.